bringing us together today.
I'm excited.
We're very, very excited to be here with MIT today and all the amazing Sloan students. And we know that they have so much value to add. The nonprofit community really, really needs them. They always needed them. And now with COVID, they've never needed those amazing Sloan alum more.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that specifically, and we'll get into this, during the presentation, but so many organizations were just hit financially, and I'm sure also like people's time was much more limited in giving back. And so maybe they expanded their boards during the pandemic. So I'll be curious to hear your feedback there as we get into the presentation. All right.
Well, the people who are joining us today, before the pandemic, they were all very much needed for like the amazing intellectual capital that they had to offer any board. But if you think about, how the nonprofit community functioned before the pandemic, things were already challenging and difficult with not enough intellectual capital, financial capital, and every other kind of capital. And COVID just made everything harder, and it just made the people who are making time to join us today that much more valuable and more needed by the nonprofit community.
Oh, that's amazing. All right, we're about 50 people in, so I'm going to start with my opening remarks. All right. Hello, Sloanies. Greetings from New York. My name is Asha Aravindakshan. I'm Sloan Fellow MBA class of 2017 and an events leader for the Sloan Club of New York. I'm thrilled to welcome Cynthia Remick to speak with our Sloan alumni and friends. I'll be moderating today's session. The session will run close to an hour between Cynthia's presentation and your questions. For those of you that pre-submitted questions in advance, thank you. The majority of those questions will be answered during Cynthia's presentation in the first half an hour. As a reminder, you are on mute and your video is turned off. You can use the Q&A bottom and the menu at the bottom of the screen to ask questions during the session. Within a week, all registered guests will receive an email from the MIT Sloan Club of New York with this recording and the links to the resources that were discussed. As folks are trickling in, why don't you share in the chat which part of the tri-state area you're listening from today and what type of boards you're interested in joining. I'll drop my info into the chat right now. All right, Cynthia, as a reminder, we're going to be joined by over 100 MIT and MIT Sloan Business School alumni and students from our regional clubs in New York, as well as their guest. They work for Fortune 1000 companies, family businesses, and their own startups. Sloan's mission is to develop us into principled, innovative leaders who improve the world and generate ideas that advance management practice. And in that vein, we host today's webinar to raise awareness of service and giving back in our local communities. Now let's meet today's speaker, Cynthia Remick. Cynthia is the founder and executive director of Board Assist, a nonprofit board matching service she started 21 years ago right here in New York City. Cynthia started her career as a corporate lawyer before making this pivot towards philanthropy. She's joining us from New York today. Cynthia, please take a few moments to tell us more about your background before starting your presentation. I'll keep an eye on the Q&A and we'll get to the audience questions in the second half an hour. Over to you.
Asha, thank you so much for organizing us today and putting us in touch with all these amazing MIT grads. I'm so excited to be talking to you all. You are all so desperately wanted by the nonprofit community here in the New York area. We need every one of you to consider joining a board, a second board, a third board. As I talk more today, you'll see how much we need you and how much we will treasure and value you if you decide to join a nonprofit board. As Asha mentioned, I'm the executive director and founder of nonprofit Board Assist. We are a nonprofit board matching service, and we are ourselves a 501c3 nonprofit. Over the last 21 years, we've brought over $165 million into the nonprofit community, but that is not the metric that we're the most proud of. The metric we are the most proud of is that over 93% of the people that we place on boards are serving as leaders where we place them within 12 months of being placed. So that is critical to us. Thank you, Asha. That is really critical to us. And that's what this talk is about, because we know MIT grads don't want to just go on a board. They want to go on a board and be an agent of change and turn it around and be impactful. So what this talk is about today is it's not an infomercial for Board Assist, as much as we love to work with all of you. And side note, we hope you'll all reach out to us at info@boardassist.org after the talk. There is no fee for MIT candidates, board alum to work with us for us to help put you on a nonprofit board. Because as I mentioned, we are a nonprofit ourselves. But if you aren't going to be working with Board Assist and you're doing your own search to join a nonprofit board, what this seminar is meant to be about is to give you the tools so that you can go out there and make sure that you find the perfect board fit. And what the perfect board fit looks like to us is that metric that I just mentioned. It's a board where you are serving as a leader, as an agent of change. And if we've done our job right, that's what's happened. And if you've done your job right with the tools that I'm going to give you today, that's what you should end up with. You should end up with a role where you can be very impactful. Everything I say today, if you have to leave early or I say it too quickly, or you get a call in the middle of me talking, it's all available on our website, boardassist.org. If you go to the FAQ tab, which is on the top of every page, it will take you to a little booklet called Giving Back, which Asha is going to circulate after the webinar today. But everything I say, everything that's in our slides today is covered in Giving Back. That said, as you'll see as I go on talking, I'm really excited to talk to all of you during the webinar, but also after the webinar. So if you go through Giving Back and you have questions, please reach out to me at info@boardassist.org and I'll come right back to you. I'm very, very excited to get you all pumped up for board service. We need you, and I know you'll all be superstars. So let's dive in before I go to the slides. Here's why I'm so desperate to get you all to serve on boards. 1.8 million nonprofit board seats open up in this country every single year. And that always surprises people. The demand for board members is enormous. So we really, really need you. And we need you, as I said, to serve on several boards. As I was saying to Asha, as people were filing in, we always needed you. Before COVID, we even needed you. But if you think about how the nonprofit community functions, we have always had limited resource in terms of time, in terms of intellectual capital, in terms of money. COVID just made all of that much worse. So we desperately needed you before, and we need you even more now. We need you to go on. We need you to find a terrific board, and then we need your experience to be a really great experience. So you tell your 3 closest friends, you know what, Asha, board service is amazing. You should join a board. That's why we're very, very invested in making sure you find the perfect board fit so that you tell everybody how great board service is and they all go on boards. If you don't find a good fit, you're going to tell all your friends, oh, all you do on a board is write checks. It's not great. You shouldn't do it. If you're on a board where all you're doing is writing a check, which is, by the way, what nobody wants. Nobody in 21 years of Board Assist has ever come to us and said, I just want to go on a board where I can write a big check and I won't have to do anything. That's not what anyone wants. People come to us and say, Cynthia, I want to make sure I'm going to join a board where I can really engage. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how you make sure you're joining a board where you can really engage. So with that all in mind, let me get my slideshow up here. Given that I am not an MIT grad, it's trickier for me. Okay, here we go. All right. Again, if you're joining late, we're going to go through a lot of this quickly because it's lunch and you guys have a lot of other things to do. But these are the initial search criteria you're going to be thinking about before you join a board. And we're going to go through each one of these a little bit more in depth. The mission of the organization, how much time you have to give to the organization, how engaged you want to be. That's what we just touched on. We know you want to do more than just write checks. The location of where you're going to need to serve. This is very different than where the organization may be located. So the organization might be serving in Africa, but they might be having board meetings in the building where you work. And so that location could be great for you. The financial commitment that's going to be expected of you. That's where a lot of board matches fall apart. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. The age and budget of the nonprofit, and then your fit with the rest of the board and the executive director. These are all things that are going to make or break your board experience. In terms of the mission of the organization, one of the questions that Asha got leading up to our webinar today was somebody who was asking about how do you make sure you're joining a board where they're going to really value what your background is. Something that's important for you to think about as you're considering board service, you might be somebody who is a lawyer, like I'm a recovering lawyer myself, as I like to say, but you may not want to be joining a board that has anything to do with legal services. Maybe you were in a band when you were at MIT and you really want to do something that has to do with music. And not only do you want the mission to be completely unrelated to legal services, but you don't want to be the lawyer on this music board. You want to do something that's completely different from your job, both in terms of mission and what you're going to add to the board. That's fine, because I'm going to keep going back to that 1.8 million number. There are so many board seats out there. You should pick a board where you're going to be doing exactly what you want with exactly the mission that you want. There is no reason to settle. And if you don't settle and you wait for that perfect fit, you're going to be that much more of an engaged board member. You're going to love board service. And then you're going to tell your 3 best friends that they should all go on board. So we're very, very invested in making sure that whether you do this on your own or you do this with Board Assist help, you're going to be very, very picky about making sure that the fit is perfect for you. So in terms of the mission, keep in mind that a lot of times, maybe you're somebody who's very, very focused on tech skills for young kids. We just got a terrific new board in last week that should appeal to a lot of MIT alum, I think. And it's helping differently abled children learn tech skills. Because what the world has seen is that if you are somebody who is differently abled, there are a lot of career opportunities for you in the tech space. And so getting differently abled people into this tech space as a child, it can really be a great thing to do. And this organization is doing just that. But this is the small organization, the one I'm telling you about, that's bringing tech skills to differently abled youth. Maybe you'd be better off going to a really large multi-service agency, which is teaching literacy, and it's also providing meals for the homeless. And they also have a program that's about tech skills for young people, especially young people who are differently abled. If this is an organization with a budget of 100 million a year and they're spending 10% of their budget on a particular issue you care about, that's $10 million a year that's going to that issue. That might be a better place for you than going to an agency that's a single issue agency focused on tech for differently abled youth that only has $1 million to spend on that issue. So don't rule out a large multi-service agency if you have a very specific interest. It could be that that's the way to go. And then you're the board member who focuses on that one issue. As I said, because you're going to be very selective about who you join, focus on like, what are the age of the consumers you want to serve? What's the ethnicity of the consumers that you want to serve? If you're working with Board Assist, come to me and say, I'm really very focused on Latinas, and I want them to be girls who are between the ages of 6 and 12, because I think that that's like a really important age to make a difference with. So if you want to help, you think about like, is there a particular demographic you want to help in terms of age, in terms of ethnicity? How many consumers does this nonprofit serve? We have organizations we work with that have a budget of hundreds of $millions a year, and maybe they only help 200 people a year, but they help them with everything. They help them with housing, they help them with jobs, they help every single part of their day, but it's a very small number of people they impact. Perhaps you'd rather be with an organization that's helping 500,000 kids a year learn computer skills. So they're working with these kids for 2 to 5 hours a week, but they're impacting a lot of people. So think about how many people you want to impact. Think about your time. If you've done a good job in finding a terrific board, or Board Assist has done a great job finding something for you, you're going to put in more time than you expected. So budget conservatively on your time. And when you're talking to organizations, before you get too far down the road with them, find out what the time commitment is expected of you. So how often does the board meet? Do you also need to serve on committees? You almost definitely will have to also serve on at least 1 or maybe 2 committees. How often do they meet? What time of day do they meet? If you're somebody who's a trader and you always have to be on the trading floor early in the morning when the floor opens, don't pick a board that meets in the morning. Pick a board that meets in the evening. And the corollary, unless things have changed a lot since I started practicing law, most lawyers work well into the night. So for lawyers, it's often great to go on a board that meets in the morning because you can reliably get to meetings more easily in the morning than in the evening. So think about the rhythm of your day, how much time you have, and what's expected, and figure this out early in the process. It always makes me very sad when I talk to somebody and they've been talking to a board that they found on their own, and they went 3 or 4 rounds talking to a lot of terrific people at the organization. And then suddenly they found out, oh, the board meets at 3 o'clock in the afternoon every month. You have to attend in person versus being able to come in by Zoom or Skype. That's just not going to work for this person, that they would have to at 3 o'clock in the afternoon every single month be in person at a board meeting in the Bronx when they work, let's say, downtown. So really early in this process is if a friend approaches you about board service, ask this question about time. How often does the organization meet? What meetings do you need to attend? What time of day are these meetings? Asha, I'm going to take a deep breath for a moment. Any questions coming in I should know about?
No, you're all set. I would like to launch a poll though that asks people when they want to join a board as far as timelines. So maybe we can give you a second to grab a drink of water.
Excellent. Okay, so while that's going on, I can continue talking,
yes.
Right, Asha?
Absolutely, go for it.
All right. Let me see. So, in terms of level of engagement, this is something that we've already touched on, but this is very important. This is one of the big reasons board service either is a great success or not. As I mentioned, most people are very, very interested in joining a board where they can really, really engage. And at Board Assist, that's our mission as a nonprofit, that we are going to find boards for the people that come to us where they can really engage. And that's why I'm very proud of that 93% number. When a board comes to us, we screen them to see, are there going to be opportunities for people to really engage beyond just writing checks or fundraising? The primary gift that you should give with any board you join should always be your intellectual capital and not just your financial capital. So if you're doing this with Board Assist, we've screened organizations to make sure, as much as we can, that they're really going to value you for something other than your money. If you're doing this on your own, you want to screen for this as well. So every person that you meet along the way, as you're talking to boards about possibly joining them, you should ask, give me some examples of what are things that board members have done in the last 24 months other than raise money? Can you give me 3 examples of that? And that's just such an important question that you should ask every person along the way that you're meeting. If any person along the way struggles with this, I'd run for the door. This should not be a difficult question. Organizations should be able to give you loads and loads of examples of things that board members have done other than raise money. If the answer is, oh, well, Asha threw a fundraiser for us and got a bunch of computers donated from her employer, those are both capital raising. Those are not things that Asha did that were about engaging her intellectual capital. That was about her using her Rolodex to bring money in. And that's an important part of board service too, but that's not what we're asking here. We're asking, what can Asha do besides just generate capital for this organization? So be sure to ask that question and see how enthusiastically the question is answered, and if it's answered at all. So you want to think about the location of the organization, and where we talked about this a little bit before as well. This is really going to be make or break for your board service as well. If you work downtown and the organization's in the Bronx and they expect you to go to meetings physically in person in the Bronx, that could be really difficult for you. But don't knock out an organization just because it's in a location that's not near your office, because a lot of time, it could be that the board chair of that organization has an office across the street from you, or even in the building where you're located. So even though they're providing services in a location that's not convenient to where you work, it's very, very possible that the board meetings and the committee meetings are very close to where you work. And so that could work. Um, Ask about, can you phone into meetings? Can you Skype into meetings? Can you Zoom into meetings? Now, keep in mind that 1.8 million number, which I keep talking about. Everybody's going to want you because you're an MIT alum and they know that you have a tremendous amount of value to add. So everyone is going to tell you it's absolutely fine for you to call into meetings. You don't need to physically be there because they want you. What you need to push them on is, well, after COVID, what's going to happen? Is everybody still going to be on Zoom, or are you going to be attending in person? And before COVID, what happened? Because that's a really good clue to you for you of how things are going to be after COVID. A lot of organizations are liking Zoom for board meetings, and they're going to keep that. But a lot of organizations, as soon as COVID is in a better place, they're going to go back to in-person meetings. And this matters a lot, because if you are the only one or one of the few that doesn't ever show up in person, you are not going to be able to be an effective board member, because you're not going to be able to build any sort of consensus or get anything done when you have a great idea and you really want to run with it and you're excited about it. People are not going to feel like you're a team player if you haven't physically been there. So if you're the only one calling in, that can be very, very difficult. You really want to understand what the norm was before COVID, and you want a commitment as to what the norm is going to be after COVID. So in terms of financial commitment, for those of you who came in a little bit late, I mentioned everything I say in this webinar is also covered on our website, boardassist.org, under the FAQ tab, which is at the top, frequently asked questions at the top of every page of the website. We talk a lot about financial commitment in our little booklet, Giving Back, which Asha is going to circulate. So I'm only going to go through a few examples here, but they're important examples because this is the biggest reason a board match might fall apart, is that there is a misunderstanding on what's expected financially of the board member. Just like with time commitment and you finding out early on in your conversations what's expected of you with regard to time, you want to find out very early in the process what's expected in terms of financial commitment. If you're working with Board Assist, we've pulled all this information out. We've pulled out the time commitment, where the board meets, at what time of day, all the information about time. And in a similar way, we have pulled out all the information on money. So if you're joining a board through Board Assist, we've pulled out the total number that's expected from you annually in terms of what you personally give, which is called the give, and what you get from others, which is the get. And the get could be company matching dollars. It could be the number of tickets that you need to sell to the ballet for the season, if it's a ballet board. It could be journal ads for the annual benefit. It could be benefit tickets, anything that you bring in, that's called the get. Something that's very surprising to a lot of people is that the give and the get are not necessarily interchangeable. So a lot of organizations will tell you that the get that's expected of you, and that's the total give plus get, is, let's say, $5,000 a year. So you might go on a board and think, okay, $5,000, I really don't like asking people for money. So I'm just going to write that check myself on the first day and be done. And I can afford to do $5,000. So you're just going to write the check for $5,000, and you're not going to bring in any additional donors. And now you've met your give get in your mind. Well, for a lot of nonprofits, you haven't met your give get, because as much as they appreciate the $5,000 and everything else that you're doing, they want to see that you're bringing in new donors, and that matters a lot to them. And so the fact that you wrote this generous check, but you didn't bring in new donors, that's not necessarily going to suffice. That can be very surprising to people. So you want to understand, are the give get interchangeable? Is it just a number I need to get to? How do you care about how that's broken up? The corollary of you giving all the money and not getting anything from someone else is a situation where Maybe there's something going on with your life right now and you have a lot of expenses, so you're not in a position to write a big check yourself, but you're a great fundraiser. And so you bring in a lot of money from a lot of other people. And one example that we heard early on with Board Assist was this guy who got married and he joined a board, and the give get was something like $2,500 a year. And because he was getting married, he had a lot of expenses that year. So he gave $1,000, but he told all his friends, rather than wedding gifts, could they make a donation to this organization? And he ended up bringing in, I'm making up a number, something like $5,000. So all in, between his $1,000 and the $5,000 he brought in $6,000. And he had committed $2,500. So that would seem like a big win, but the organization didn't consider it a win because they thought that he was personally going to be giving a certain amount. And it was great that he brought all this money in from others, but they didn't feel like he had the skin in the game because he didn't write that check, even though he made the wedding gifts for his wedding all to this organization. So I would argue that's a lot of skin in the game, but that's not the way they saw it. So know that this give get thing is a little complicated. You want to be really, really clear what the total number is, and are they interchangeable? You also want to get this all in writing. This is really important point that we'll keep going back to. Boards change, so you may have worked out a deal with the current board chair where Asha said, you know what, I really don't like fundraising. I'm just going to write this check myself every year. And the current board chair really wanted to have Asha, because who wouldn't want to have Asha? And so they said, that's great. You can just write that check. But now 2 years later, they're off the board. The new board chair is like, Asha, I don't understand. Like, you're not doing anything on the get. And it's nice to have this paper trail. Like, this is what we agreed to. I was always going to be somebody who wasn't going to be helping on the get. The corollary also, you might be working for an organization that's really generous with their employees in terms of donating money to organizations where you sit on the board. If that organization writes a big check to your organization, but you're not personally putting money in, somebody could be disappointed. So you just want to be very, very clear on these two pieces. Dropping down to the third bullet, we at Board Assist believe that you should never join a board where it's not extremely clear what's expected of you in terms of the total give plus get. So a lot of organizations will ask you to give something. We don't need to worry about locking in a number. Let's just agree that you're going to give something personally significant every year, or we're going to be one of the top 3 philanthropies that you support every year. And let's just leave it at that. We would strongly recommend you don't just leave it at that. We've seen too many times where people come to us, they found a board on their own and they got in trouble with this. They joined a board where everybody was a social worker or teacher, and they were the only investment banker on the board, and they gave $25,000 and everybody else gave $1,000, and they thought $25,000 was a lot compared to everybody else. But the social workers and the teachers on the board thought, that guy's making $2 million a year. I think he could do more than 25,000. So it's very hard to understand how other people are going to be valuing what you're giving. And there's a lot of room for hurt feelings and misinterpretation. So we personally think it's a very good idea and a best practice to make sure you know exactly what that number is, and that it's the total amount that's expected when you consider everything that you have to give and everything you have to get, the capital campaign, the benefit tickets, the journal ads, everything. Typically for a New York board, $5,000 to $10,000 a year is kind of the median of what's expected for a New York board, but we do have boards that start as little as $2,000 a year. Keep in mind also that this should never, ever be your primary gift. Your primary gift should always be the amazing intellectual capital that you are offering as an MIT grad. But boards all need the saying in the nonprofit community is time, talent, and treasure. So they need all those pieces, and they very much count on the board helping them with that treasure piece as well, but it cannot be the primary piece. One last thing I'll say about financial commitment, and as I said, there's a lot of information about this. It goes on for pages in our booklet, Giving Back. We don't need to spend too much more time on this, but you want to understand where your giving is vis-a-vis the rest of the board. And this is really important because maybe you're going on a board and you're the only person on the board who knows anything about social media, or you're the only person on the board who has any tech skills. And everybody else on the board is over 80 years old and they don't even know what the internet is. So they're really looking to you to help with this piece. And everybody else on the board gets $25,000 a year, but they've said, you know what, Asha, you're the only person who understands what the internet is. You can come on for $1,000 a year because we really need you. You're the only social media person, or you're the only person who's bringing some other kind of diversity, whether it's racial diversity, generational diversity, skills diversity. We really need you. So you can do $1,000 a year. Everybody else is doing 25. If that's the case, you may feel like, you know what, I am bringing something really important and I'm comfortable that I'm giving a lot less than everybody else. And I'm really glad that I understand that, because you don't want to be surprised when you get on the board and you find out you're giving $1,000 a year and everyone else is getting 25. And maybe that makes you feel really uncomfortable, even though you are bringing in all this other tremendous value. So you're entitled to know what's being asked of you versus everybody else on the board. And another issue is if you join a board where you're giving a lot less than everyone else, I always worry that that might change. So after you've been on the board for a year or two, there's a new executive director who comes in, there's a new board chair that comes in. By the way, this is why you've documented all this. So you have your paper trail that this is what you agreed to. You knew that your number was different than everyone else and everybody was okay with that. But, you don't want to feel pressured now to suddenly do $25,000 a year. The corollary to this is a board where you're being asked to do $25,000 a year and everybody else who's currently on the board does $1,000 a year. And that might be fine with you because maybe you have a job where you're paid very handsomely and everybody else on the board isn't. So you feel comfortable with that, but you're entitled to know. The situation that makes people very upset is if you join a board and you understood that you were paying more than the people on the board who work for government or work in the nonprofit sector. But now you're a lawyer at a big firm and you've committed to do $25,000 a year. And you just found out that all the other board members who are also lawyers at big firms are doing $1,000 a year. So they were grandfathered in under some smaller number. So you might be fine with that. Most people don't like it when they're being asked to give something different than other people who are in a similar position to give. So if you're working with board assist, this is part of our due diligence. We have found out how much you're being asked to give versus everybody else. If you're doing this on your own, I would ask this question. It may feel like a little uncomfortable, but it's better to find out before you join the board versus after you've already been on the board. And as I said about time commitment, this is something financial commitment. You want to have this conversation before you even have the first sit down with an organization. No matter how much you love an organization, if it turns out that they want $25,000 a year from you and your budget for board service was $5,000 a year, it really doesn't make sense for you to have had 5 meetings with these people. And what happens is nonprofits don't like talking about money. Board candidates don't like talking about money. So nobody talks about money. And now you're at the very end, you've been talking to this organization for 2 months, and now you find out that you're on a very different page in terms of what's going to be expected of you financially. They're looking at your job and they think, well, that's somebody who's in a position to give a lot of money. So we don't even have to have the money conversation. And then you find out it was a very different number than the number you thought. Just so you know, there is not a direct correlation between the size of the organization you're joining and how much money you might be expected to give. We've worked with tiny startups that have a budget of $200,000 a year that expect board members to give $50,000 a year. And then we've worked with some of the biggest names in the nonprofit community who expect their board members to give $1,000 a year. So don't be thinking, oh, it's just a small little startup, how expensive this is going to be. Or I shouldn't talk to this like household name that I really want to be part of because I'm sure it's too expensive. Ask the question. If you're working with board assist, we asked for you already. But if you're doing this on your own, ask the question and see, like, is this something that you can afford? Asha, any questions on financial commitment?
Oh, Cynthia, so many questions on financial
I
commitment.
thought so.
I'm sure this is the part of the presentation where you get the most questions. So I would like to answer
Indeed.
some of them from the audience. And so I'm glad you brought up time, treasure, and talent as like the trifecta of what we bring as individuals to an organization. Can you maybe just give a sense of, in the past 3 to 5 years, how many organizations you've worked with that have required a low financial commitment or no financial commitment, just so the audience has a sense of what the breakdown is?
Right. So what I would say is uh, keep in mind that Board Assist is a New York nonprofit, and we work with nonprofits that are, for 99%, they're located in New York or the tri-state area, very close to New York City. But they serve locally, nationally, and internationally. So as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, it could be, we're working with the largest medical relief nonprofit in Africa. It's a wonderful organization. The board chair is somebody that we placed there years ago. So it could be that you're working with an organization that's serving outside of New York, but they're located in New York. For the most part, New York nonprofits all ask for financial commitment. I know in other cities that's not the case, but for the most part, I know with organizations that come to Board Assist, we are not working with anyone that doesn't require an annual financial commitment. In fairness to the nonprofit community, because a lot of people will feel like, well, I'm giving so much time. Why do I have to give money also? A lot of the foundation community, those are the foundations that fund nonprofits. If we receive a lot of foundation funding that allows us to do our work, they will ask us to show how much each board member gave every year. And they use that as a proxy for board engagement, which I think it's a little unfair. If I have a really great board member who doesn't give any money, but they're still a really great board member, like I have a social media board member who's incredible, but she isn't one of the bigger donors on our board, but I would be lost without her. She's incredible. So I think it's a little unfair to argue that she's not as engaged as somebody else who gave a larger amount of money. But the foundation community asks nonprofits to show how much their board members gave, especially the New York foundation community. So if you're a board member and you're not giving at least $1,000 a year, you're going to hurt that nonprofit's ability to raise money from the foundation community. So I think you really should consider that you're going to be asked to give at least $1,000 to $2,500 a year. The great bulk of the boards we work with, if you're hitting between $4,000 to $6,000 a year, and remember that's a total give plus get. That includes company matching dollars, that includes fundraising, and then the rest ask for more than that. If you email me after the webinar, we put out a report every year on what different boards ask, how it breaks down. An interesting thing, which I just mentioned, is the give get does not go up in a perfectly linear way with the size of the organization's budget. So a lot of people will say, well, I can only afford a starter board. Whether you join a starter board or a prestigious board that's a household name, it's not going to necessarily be about money. It's going to be about your skill set and what they need at that moment in time. So you might be surprised at how affordable your dream board is. That's like a major household name.
That's good. Great. Thank you for sharing that, Cynthia. There's one question here about, do you have to be NACD certified to join a nonprofit board?
Okay, I don't even know what the NACD is. I'm guessing that's going to be CD as corporate directors. And I think that is, that's a corporate, if it's what I'm thinking of, the NACD is the National Association of Corporate Directors. And
That's
it's
right.
about corporate directors. So this is the nonprofit world. You don't need to be certified in any way to join a nonprofit board. You just need to have passion for the organization's mission and then meet a hole that they're trying to fill at that time.
Great. Thank you. Let's keep going.
Okay. So you want to look at the age and the budget of the nonprofit. And we alluded to this a little bit before. Do you want to start up or an established nonprofit? A lot of people think, I really want to go on the board of a startup. I'm going to be able to get so much more involved, and the established nonprofit won't need me as much and I won't be as engaged. That's not always true. I will caution you with a startup nonprofit, sometimes they don't have the resources to move forward with great ideas that you have. So, you go to board meetings, everybody's got 5 great ideas. At the next board meeting, none of those ideas move forward because they just didn't have the resources to move these ideas forward. So that can be very frustrating with a startup. They're obviously going to be like a little less disorganized because they're a startup. With a large organization, a lot of people think there isn't going to be a job beyond fundraising. That's not necessarily true. One of the largest nonprofits that we've been supporting for quite some time is also by far the most engaged board that we support. The executive director is just a phenomenal manager, and he does a great job at finding things that board members want to work on and engaging them with those projects. So don't write off a large organization thinking that you won't be able to be involved. And with a small startup, just approach it cautiously, understanding that you're probably going to have to perform some staff functions if they're really small because there isn't staff to move these ideas forward. So it's really important to think about the age and the budget of the nonprofit and what your role is going to be as a result of that. And one other thing I'll say about the age and the budget of the nonprofit is because I mentioned this in terms of having resources and being able to do more than fundraise. One clue when you're trying to sniff out boards that want you just perhaps for your checkbook and not for your intellectual capital is to take a good look at the size of the board. If the board has 40 members already, it's really hard to imagine there's a need that's going to be met by you that isn't already being met. That's a very large board. So organizations that are really large like that, those are usually boards that are really focused on bringing you in as an additional source of funds. Now, that's not always the case. So this is something you should be asking as you're interviewing. As I see you have 40 people on the board, why do you need me at this time? Because it seems like you have a really terrific board. And they may say, you know what, we have a great board, but we worked with an organization a few years ago and they said, listen, we're building the board right now because we literally have nobody that walks into the board meetings alone. And I didn't understand what that meant. And we said, everybody on the board is so old, they're all either in a wheelchair or they come with their aide. We didn't do any, we really work well together. We really love each other, but we didn't do anything about succession planning. So we all need to resign like basically in the next year or two. And even though there seems to be a lot of us and we work really well together, we need to bring in that whole next generation. Or it could be, we're missing a very specific skill set. So even though there's a lot of us, we really need a specific skill set. And that's why we're adding right now. But if it's a large board, you definitely want to ask why you're adding right now and push hard on, is there an ability to engage beyond fundraising? Okay, partnering with the executive director. This is so important. You all have very, very generously decided to give your time to board service. And we really, really appreciate that. I cannot say that often enough to you. Because of that, because we value that, and because what you've done is so incredibly selfless and wonderful, we want you to have a good time too. So board service should be something that's like a joy for you, that you really, every minute of is something that you see yourself making an impact, you're meeting interesting people, and you really feel inspired and enjoy working with the executive director. So this is so important. I don't care how much you love the mission. Really do a deep dive into, are you going to partner well with this executive director? Is this somebody that you really like? Is this someone you're excited to work with? Do they have a management style that works well with you? Asha and I work really, really well together. She sends an email and I have responded before she's even hit send, and vice versa. We are totally on the same page. We could be on 10 boards together and we would have so much fun. But if you really love the organization, but you don't feel inspired by the executive director, or you send them an email and they come back 5 days later, is that going to frustrate you? That would really frustrate me. I get very excited about things. If somebody came back 5 days later, I would be frustrated. Keep in mind, this is the courting phase right now. This is when they're desperate to get you on this board. If it's taking 5 days for the executive director to respond to you about something, and you're somebody like me who doesn't like that delay in response time, it's not going to get better after you're on the board. Somebody said to me once years ago, and I love this, that shopping for a board with Board Assist was like going to the pet store and looking at puppies. They said every executive director they met, they were so excited about, they just wanted to take them home. And so that's how you should feel. It should, like, it's a terrible analogy, but it's meant to make you think about how excited you should feel. You should feel as excited as if you went to the store and you saw that cute puppy and you thought, I really just cannot live without this puppy in my life. I'm so excited to work with this executive director, be involved with this mission, work with the board. You need to be excited about them. Take a good look at how the executive director works with the rest of the board and specifically the board chair. We have worked with organizations where the executive director and the board chair were not speaking to each other. And they have been speaking to each other for months. So that's going to be a very difficult situation for you to walk into. And as great as you may feel about this executive director and the board chair, if they don't partner well together, then it's really going to be a very hard board for you to be effective with. So, you may be asking, Cynthia, how am I going to know how these people work together? You'll see by the tone of how they speak to each other in email. If the executive director writes you back when you say, I'm trying to get in touch with the board chair, but I haven't heard from them. And the executive director says, oh yeah, they're always a little unreliable. Then you have a problem. Instead you want the executive director to be saying, oh, well, I know that Asha is just getting back from her wedding and, she's the best, but she's a little slowed down this week. So, how do they speak about each other? How do they partner with each other? Take a good look at that relationship. And then take a good look at who this executive director is. So don't just look at their bio on the website of the nonprofit. Go on their LinkedIn and see, oh, this person has been in like 5 different jobs in the last 2 years. Well, what is that about? See who they know that in common. I really do a deep dive into who this executive director is, because this is going to make a big difference in your board experience. Look at how long they've been in the role. Have they been in the role for 20 years and maybe they're not going to really be willing to embrace change because they've been in the role for a long time? And if they have been there for a long time, ask the other board members you're speaking to, how willing is this person to embrace change? Because I notice they've been there for a long time. And they may say, oh, no, she's like the best. He's really, really great about, all our ideas and loves change, or maybe not. A really fun time to join a board is when the executive director of a long time is stepping down, and you're going to be part of the board while they bring in somebody new. So that can be a very fun time. Other people feel like, I don't really want to join a board where I don't know who the executive director is going to be, because Board has told me it's really important who the executive director is. And what if I don't like the new person they bring in? But most people really love joining a board when they're about to change executive directors. Look at the board culture. Again, this should be a group of people you really look forward to spending time with and partnering, and that you like. Think about the mix of people that you want to work with. I hate to pick on lawyers, but maybe you're a lawyer and you felt the same way I did when you were practicing law. When I was practicing law, you didn't really want to be with lawyers outside of the office, also in your board service, on a board that was all lawyers. So maybe, as I said, you were a musician when you were at MIT and you really loved to be on a board. There was a lot of musicians or artists or writers or, people who were politicians or consultants. So think about that mix of people that you'd really like to serve with. Because you have 1.8 million nonprofit board seats opening up in the country, you can be very selective about who do you want to serve with. And also, it's okay to come to Board Assist or to say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to do this great thing. I'm going to give back and I'm going to join a board. And it literally would be great for business from a networking point of view to be with a certain group of people. So that's okay. That's okay to join a board where you're hoping that you're going to meet a certain group of people that are going to be able to help you with business. And it's okay to tell Board Assist, I'm a corporate lawyer that works in the entertainment space. I'd love to go on a board that had a lot of people that worked in the entertainment space. Look at the board turnover rate. Ask about the board turnover rate. There could be a really great reason that everybody on the board has left and they're building a whole new board now. There could be a really bad reason, like nobody can work with the executive director and that issue is still there. The good reason could be it was a founder's board, and now that they become more professional, they brought in new money, it's no longer to be friends and family of the founder. They're looking for the first professional board. It could be there was a problem with the former board chair, but that board chair has left, and but unfortunately, she drove everybody out before she left, and so now the issue's gone away, and it's a great time to join. Why is the board adding now? We talked about that a little bit in terms of the size of the board. You really want to understand if it's a big board, why are they adding right now? And you want to look at the credentials of the board chair. Are they somebody who can run a meeting efficiently and professionally? A lot of boards, you'll look at the mix of who's on the board, and you'll see, a prominent lawyer, a prominent consultant, somebody with a big job at, Facebook. And, the board looks great, but you didn't drill down into who the board chair was. And the board chair was somebody who was kind of least qualified to be running the board. I have sat on the board of an organization that I love the mission. I love the executive director. I loved everybody on the board. I even loved the board chair, but the board chair was not in a position to run the meetings professionally. And the meetings would start with sort of 30 minutes to an hour of details of her last vacation. And it really wasn't the most productive use of the board's time. And as a result, people stopped attending the meetings, and it became a problem. So it's really important to look at the credentials of the board chair. I would also I would pull up on LinkedIn every member of the board. Most websites now for nonprofits have a short bio on each board member. You're going to learn so much more if you just go on LinkedIn and pull up everybody on the board, see who you know in common with them, and see who these people are, because you can learn so much more, obviously, from looking at someone's LinkedIn profile than you can from their bio on a website. Okay, we're down to the last slide, so we're leaving time for questions. The board matching process. If you're doing this on your own, just follow along with the booklet, which I've talked about, Giving Back, which you can find on the boardassist.org website. If you're doing this with us, what's going to happen is you'll come to me, you'll give us a lot of information about all the things that we've talked about, your financial commitment, your time commitment, areas of interest, who you want to serve with, blah, blah, blah. And we'll come up with a short list of 3 nonprofits for you to go talk to. We'll show you everything. But then we'll suggest, you know what, Asha, I think these 3, given everything you told me, are the 3 best picks for you. And we'll work together to come up with that short list. You'll then say, you know what, I forgot to tell you, I actually really care about housing in South America. And I'm like, okay, I've got a board that's doing that. So we'll work back and forth, and we'll come up with that short list. And then you'll go out and start talking to people. And we would really encourage you, if you're doing this on your own, make sure you meet at a minimum the board chair and the executive director. We just talked about why that's so incredibly important that you meet those 2 key players. What's going to happen with a lot of situations, because everybody wants you, is going to be, you're going to meet the executive director or the board chair. They're going to love you, and they're going to say, we'd love to have you. Can you come to the next board meeting? We'd like to vote you in. And hopefully you're going to say, that's so great, and I'm very flattered, but I really would like to meet missing parties that I haven't met yet. So at a minimum, the board chair and the executive director. If you're working through us, we're there to slow things down and make sure that you're getting to meet all the important players that are going to impact your board experience. If you're working with us, you're likely at the end of this process to receive multiple board offers. And we love when that happens. You'll love when that happens a little bit less, because it's going to be very, very hard to pick, if we've done our job well, which board offer you're going to take. Full disclosure, a lot of people come to us looking for 1 board and end up taking 2 because they can't pick at the end. We love when that happens. And we think that that's actually a great thing to do, because serving on 2 different boards, often you will learn so much serving 1 board that you can then take to the other board, and vice versa. So don't be afraid to join 2 boards at once. That can be a really powerful and great combination. So I really, really hope that you all are thinking about board service. We really need you for board service. I'd love to help anybody who lives in the New York area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, with a board. Just email me at info@boardassist.org. after the webinar, and I'd love to start helping you on your board journey. If you're doing this on your own, I'm still here to help. Please don't be a stranger. If you're running into any questions as you're trying to decide, just shoot me an email. I'll come right back and try to help you. And I hope the tools that we've given you today, if you're working on your own, will also help. So with that in mind, Asha, what do we have in the way of questions?
We have several questions related to director and officers insurance, D&O insurance.
Okay.
Can you explain what that is, what the legal liability is for the board member, and if they need to get director's insurance for a nonprofit board?
I'm so glad you brought that up. That's such a great question. So a few things. One, in that booklet, Giving Back, we have a page where we talk about D&O insurance. So just so you know, it's in there. But here are the things, the takeaways on D&O insurance. One, it's very, so in terms of what it is insurance that is meant to cover you as a board member for serving on a nonprofit board. Surprising to most people is D&O insurance is very inexpensive. Board Assist pays $833 a year for our D&O insurance.
Wow.
It is not expensive. So
Okay.
if you're joining a board that doesn't have D&O insurance, you may be the board member that comes on and says, you know what, I'll write that check. I'm happy to make that donation every year. Most organizations do have D&O insurance. If they don't, maybe it's because it's a small organization that doesn't even know about D&O insurance. So, you are adding so much value by coming in and saying, wait, why do we have D&O insurance? Let me buy that for the organization and put that in place. The last thing to know about D&O insurance that most people don't know is for almost all of you, under your renter's insurance or your homeowner's insurance, you have a free rider for nonprofit board service. So even if the organization, I like that look on Asha's face.
I did not know that. I learned that today. That's amazing.
Most people don't know that. And listen, maybe your policy doesn't cover that. I literally have never spoken to anyone whose policy, even if it's renter's insurance, it almost always has a free rider for nonprofit board service. Corporate board service, that's a different thing. But for nonprofit board service, your own policy almost definitely covers it. Now, keep in mind, I've told you I'm a recovering lawyer, so I'm no longer a practicing lawyer, so I could be wrong about all this, but our longtime board chair was the head of the corporate department at Cravath, Swaine & Ward, which is a terrific law firm here in New York. And they have given us the legalese for our booklet Giving Back. So I'm pretty sure I got this right. But it's D&O insurance. You definitely want to make sure your organization has it, or that you're covered under your own insurance.
Perfect. Last couple of questions here. What's the typical size of a nonprofit board?
I would say 8 to 20. And of course, speaking of numbers, I'm so sorry, but I should have brought up this number, because if the attendees didn't ask this question, I'd be surprised, because almost everybody does. A lot of people ask, how long is this whole thing going to take? I'm really excited to join a board. How long is it going to take? Mm-hmm. So if you're working with us, you should know that we have placed people on boards in as little as 24 hours. Just sometimes, like, you have like this perfect idea of what you want. I happen to have exactly that board. I introduce you, and you manage to go 3 rounds really quickly with the executive director and then the board chair, and then you're just on. And then other boards take up to a year, because they have some very lengthy process. In general, you should be thinking it's going to take, I would say, 6 to 12 weeks. That's a good number. So if you're somebody, lots of times people reach out to us and they're like, I'm living in London and I'm going to be living in New York in 6 months. I'm moving to New York. I want to join a board. I'd like to get started. I'm like, you know what? Come to me a month before you get here, because this process moves actually pretty quickly. So, the time to start looking is when you're ready to join, because if you talk to an organization and they're all excited about you, and then you say, well, I'm not really ready to join yet, you may not have that opportunity again. They may have felt their need for that one social media person that you were going to be, or 2, they may be like a little offended that you weren't willing to join right away. So I always tell people joining board is a little bit like asking somebody to the prom. Everyone's feelings are very vulnerable. The nonprofit is putting themselves out there and saying, Asha, we love you. We hope you'll join. And if Asha says no, their feelings are going to be very hurt. And, the other way around as well. So everyone's feelings are very vulnerable in this process. And, it's good to keep that in mind.
That's great, Cynthia. Thank you so much. I learned a ton today. I've served on boards for the last 10 years, but definitely learned some great nuggets here about how our time, talent, and treasure can be given back, especially in the New York community, which is in a dire need for board members. So really appreciate all your insights. As I mentioned at the start of the webinar, we'll be sending the slides, the recording, and all the links that were shared in today's chat in a follow-up email within a week to everyone that registered. And then if you are ready to take the action of moving forward with the board, and I saw there over 30 of you said you're ready to do this in the next 3 to 6 months, which is amazing. Please email info@boardassist.org and mention Sloan. And that way Cynthia and her team will start right away on matching you. And when I say right away, like, guys, she wasn't kidding. She's on top of her email. So you better be ready to get matched and to look at the list that she's going to provide you, and also be really clear on your expectations and what you're looking for, because the more information you can give her, the better she can help you. Cynthia, any closing words?
No, I really appreciate how many of you chose to spend your lunch hour with us today. And Asha, I have to say, I'm looking at the number of participants that we ended with. It's pretty much where we started. So I really appreciate that you all stayed with us for the full hour and we didn't put you to sleep. And we would have been me, because Asha would never put anyone to sleep.
Thank you.
But I really appreciate your time, and I'm really looking forward to working with all of you.
Great. And I just want to say, for everyone here that's interested in board service, I am working with NASDAQ to plan an event at the end of September or October related to board placement, assessment, skills development. So stay tuned. We'll continue this series. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Asha, if I could just add one last thing, because you mentioned that. If you guys go on YouTube and you just type in Board Assist, we have a really great talk. It's not me talking. That's why I can say it's really great. From the team that they're the leading corporate board placement recruiting service in the country. It's the team at Spencer Stewart that does corporate board placement and corporate board recruiting. And we sat down with the team and they gave pointers on how you get noticed for corporate board service, which is something I know a lot of MIT grads are interested in. So you can find that. Just type in Board Assist on YouTube and it'll pop right up.
Thanks again, Cynthia. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Asha.